Okay, before going ahead with today's session, do you have any doubts? You, Bhagirash and Ravali?
No, Venkat.
Okay.
No, Venkat, nothing from my end.
No, Venkat.
Okay. Okay, we'll start with miscellaneous components. We have three miscellaneous components. One is redefine format, replicate, and thrash. So the first component is a redefine component. What it will do is the redefine component copies the records from its input port to its output port. So the redefined format copies the record format from its input port to the output ports. But whenever it is getting a copied from its input port to the output port, according to the requirement whatever we have, based on that we can change the format once again. That is, we are redefining the format once again from its input port to the output port according to the requirement. So mainly when we are going to use this component is whenever we are connecting to the mainframe systems, there a lot of chances are there, like reading the nested records format of the data. So in such a case, to redefine the format of the fields without changing the values or the contents of it, then the redefined format is the best component to use it. So we will see practically how does the data looks for a sample case. I cannot connect to the mainframe systems, but similar to the one of the data I have prepared it, and here we don't be having any of the parameters. Okay, so we have like a fixed size of the DML, one with the employee details fields and the other with the department number. So far we are working with this record, so I can predict some of the fields like employee number, name, manager number, and salary like this. But in real time we cannot predict the records. So most of the records are coming at one field, and sometimes the fields are coming as a nested vectors also, nested records, a record within the record and with multiple levels. So in such a case, to redefine the format of the records, whatever it is coming from the input to the output, the best component can be used is a redefined format component. So here we are not going to change any of the values. If you can see, there are no parameters. According to the ports, whatever the input and the output, it will just redefine the values. So input is, I have a fixed size of 20 bytes of employee details, and the output I require is the first 4 bytes belongs to the employee number, 7 bytes belongs to employee name, manager number of string 4 bytes, and then we have a salary field of 5 bytes. So if you have a requirement like this, then better to use a redefined format. So the fields will be segregated accordingly to the from the input to the output port. This is very small component, and component. Then we have a replicate component. This is very important component, the replicate. So what the replicate component is going to do is, it combines all the records, whatever it is coming from the input port, into a single flow and writes a copy of these records to all the flows where it get connected. So what does I mean is it will be having an input port and the output port with no parameters at all. I may be sending the data to the replicate from the multiple flows. So whatever the flows it get connected, it arbitrarily reads the data. There is no pattern of reading the data to the replicate component. Whichever the record comes first to the replicate, it arbitrarily reads all the records and makes it into a single flow. So it could be one flow or multiple flows. It reads all the records and makes it into a single flow, and then writes a copy of that record. Whatever, let's say here 5 records we are getting and 5 more records from the other flow. Totally it makes 10 records and copies into a single flow and writes a copy of that flow to the output port. So again here in the output port, generally the replicate will be used to connect to the multiple components to split into multiple floors the data. We will be using the replicate. The whole data, whatever it is coming on the flows, the same data we will be replicating it. So if I take it an example of filter by expression, let's say I have a filter by expression component. Here I will be having the select and the deselect port, output and deselect. Output is a mandatory and deselect port is an optional one. But let's say I have to split the flows whatever coming from the output port to the multiple ports. Can I connect it, the multiple flows from the output port to the multiple components? So I may be having like multiple components here, same as the above. So for these two components, I have to send the same data, whatever it is coming from the output port of the filter by expression. No, I cannot do this. So in such a case, we have to use a replicate component here and make it only one flow that connects to the replicate, and from the replicate we can move it to n number of flows, how many we require it. And the advantage over with the broadcast, so many times in the interviews people will be asking what is the difference between the broadcast and replicate. So can you tell me what a broadcast will do?
Broadcast also will do the same thing. It will replicate, I mean, send the same data which is coming in the input port. It will send the same output to different, I mean, partitions
Okay,
as per the number of partitions we have given.
so you mean to say broadcast and replicate are same?
That's what my, I mean, my concern is.
Okay, yeah, I agree whatever you said, and so for whatever we discussed, that's true. So but there is a difference between the broadcast and the replicate. So what exactly the difference we have is, so the broadcast reads the records arbitrarily from the input ports and distributes the records to its partitions. To distribute to all the partitions, it distributes the records equally. So what I mean is, if I'm using a broadcast, let's say 10 records is coming to the broadcast on different flows, 5 records, and if I'm again redistributing to the different partitions by using the broadcast, then each of the partition will be having 10 records, so it makes 20 records the broadcast. But that is not the way we are expecting in the real time. So how many records are coming in each of the partitions? Only those many records has to flow on each of the partition. That can be done using a replicate. So in the partition 0, I may be having 5 records, and in the partition 1, I may be having another 5 records. So 10 records in the filter by expression that got satisfied from the output port. So I want to send those 10 records flowing from 0th partition 5 and first partition 5 records to each of the components. Then that can be done here. If I'm using, instead of replicate here, the broadcast, it will be flowing 20 records. So that is a major difference between the broadcast and the replicate. And coming to the flows, what we have here is, for the broadcast, it's a fan out flow, we call it as. So this is a next concept we are going to discuss, and replicate is a straight flow. The two major differences we have is what kind of the flows the data will be distributing. The broadcast is a fan out flow and replicate is a straight flow. And broadcast distributes the records, it combines all the records and distributes to all the partitions the same number of records, but replicate distributes the records whatever we have on the partitions itself. It will not be combining all the partitions records and then distributing. No, it will not be having. Partition to partition, the distribution will happen. 1 second. Okay. Yeah, any doubts related to this replicate, how it works?
No, Venkat.
Okay. So this is the major advantage. Better you don't use the broadcast. Most of the times we don't use the broadcast, but if you take it any of the graph, definitely the replicate component will be there. So there are two cases. Whenever you want to distribute the flows into multiple flows, the data into multiple flows, and which cannot be done by the component whatever we are using it here, then the first thing is we have to use a replicate. So if I ask you, like, I have an input file and the same data has to be sent to the multiple components. So how do you design the graph? This is an input file and the same data has to send to multiple components here. So what's
Directly from input file.
pardon?
Directly from input file only we can send it, right? We can give multiple flows to input file, multiple output bars.
Yes, exactly. So that is a step we have to take it. Some people, again, they will be using the replicate component, connected the replicate component to the input file, and from the replicate they will be connected to the multiple flows. That should not be done, because from the input file itself we can be connected to the multiple flows. So the first case is, whenever the requirement is connected to the multiple flows, the data has to be splitted across multiple flows, and which cannot be done using the component whatever the data is coming. Then only you have to use a replicate. First try to look for the component can able to spread the flows or not. If not, then only you use the replicate component. Okay. And then we have a thrash. This is very simple, and this is available on the 3.1 version. It's nothing but like a recycle bin, whatever the records we don't want to capture. So let's say, like, here The output port is a mandatory port and deselect port is an optional port. But the conditions whatever we are writing here is, if it's a direct straightforward conditions, then the like then the records that we are expecting will come into the output port. If I have a requirement like rejection of the records, means I mean to say like whatever we discussed as part of the requirement, finding out the bad records that should not be processed and finding out only good records. So if I have a requirement in such a case, then whatever the conditions we have written here definitely will come the bad records in the output port, but I want to process the good records. So definitely the good addresses will come on the deselect port. So in such a case, I cannot just leave it this port as it is. I have to connect this port to the sum of the component. But can I use this output file? Can I connect the port to the output file coming from the filter by expression? I don't require the records also. Then why I need to waste the space on the disk? So in such a case, better uses a thrash component. Use a thrash component, connect to that. It will just discard the records. And here again, it's the records whatever it is coming is a optional port, but we require it for the further processing it. So this you can connect to the next flow, whatever you require it. So in such cases only we have to use thrash. Whenever we have a requirement to discard the record and it's a mandatory port which we cannot be done anything, then better to use thrash. If it is an optional port, you don't worry about that. If you don't connect to any of the components also, by default it will get discarded. Clear about the thrash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Venkat, there are few other components,
But
right? Miscellaneous,
Bhagirash,
miscellaneous, right?
what is that?
Hello.
Yeah, yeah.
There are few, yeah, few more components also there in miscellaneous, right? Like meta pivot,
What are the other?
meta pivot.
I have not used actually meta pivot.
Okay. Mhm.
Any other components?
No, Venkat.
Okay.
I don't have any idea on that.
Okay, I'll look that, and if I can accommodate, I will let you know by end of the course. I'll try to accommodate that
Okay,
as
fine.
well. Okay.
Yeah.
Then we have the components as database components. In database components, we have like input table, output table, run SQL, truncate table, and update table. These are the 5 components we have under database components. So how we have so far used the input file component to read the data from the file. So if we have a requirement to read the data from the table, then we have to use an input table component. And similarly, to load the data into the table, we have to use output table component. And at high level, we will see what are each of the components and the run SQL. So this is a one very good component where you can run any of the SQL statement: insert, update, delete, create, alter, drop, truncate, whatever. It could be a DML statement or the DDL statement, whatever the statement you want to run it, you can run it using the run SQL component. So sometimes there are chances even to use this run SQL component to building the basement of the whole database itself. So we can set up all the commands whatever we require in the file, and that can be used in this run SQL component. And if you run it in the phase 0, then the whole database framework itself will be established using this run SQL component, and then we can start the running of the next process. Even that can also be done. If sometimes the process, it's like a one-time process will be there, so in such a cases we can be utilize this component as well, because the whole concept whatever we are running it, that will in a lifetime we will be running only once, or else whenever on ad hoc basis, if the something crashes and we have to rebuild the whole environment again, then also it's like a one-time process we call it as. In such a process we can put whole statements whatever we are going to build the database into one of the file and can access in the run SQL, and that graph can be run on the 0th phase of this component. And truncate table, as we know the data will be deleted, the whole data will get deleted from the table. And update table, here the name says that it's going to update the records, but in generally we will be using for that only, but there is no specific constraint like we have to use only the update statement. uh, we can use insert delete as well in the update table components. So here we will be having two parameters like update file and the insert file. So even in the update SQL file parameter also we can use any of the statement update, insert, delete, and in the insert we can use any of the statement. But as part of the requirement, better we use update statement in the update SQL file parameter and insert statement in the insert SQL file. How does it works is, so whatever the records it is coming from the file on the flow to the port of the update table, so it tries to update the record, but if it is unable to find the record, then unable to update the record means it is not found in the database, then the insert statement will get executed and the record will be inserted into the table. So now we will discuss each of the components. So this is all about the database components at high level. And the parameters we have for the input table is, first parameter is a field type preference. So this parameter talks about what is the delimiter that is going to be generated for this record format. So whenever the table components we are using it by default, and the extraction can be done in two ways. One is directly we can specify the table whatever we are going to unload, or else we can specify the select statement which can be unloaded from the single table or from the multiple tables by specifying the join condition. So accordingly the DML will get generated in the ports. So we have an option to generate the DML in the table component itself. We no need to define our own. So in such a case, by default, according to the um, delimiter whatever we specified, there are different ways to specify the delimiter, so that will be taken while generation of the DML. So what kind of the DML it has to be generated? It's a delimited or a variable or a fixed DML has to be generated. That is what it says. The field type preference, it has three values like delimiter, variable, and fixed. So if you are specifying the field type preference as a delimiter, then you have to specify what is a column delimiter. And if you are not specifying, by default we have a delimiter as 0x01, and the database itself will generate the default one. So that is something a different delimiter. I will show you how does it looks and all. And we have a parameter called max rows. So this parameter specifies how many maximum number of rows we have to unload the data from the table. This is per partition how many rows we have to unload. If I say like 100 records, So it will be unloaded 200 records if it is a two-way MFS file system, because per partition what is the maximum number of rows it has to unload, that will be specified. And we have a parameter called AB local expression, and this is important, AB local expression. So whenever you're unloading the data in the multi-file system, so the table component will also run parallelly and does the unload parallelly. So while unloading the data, if you have a requirement to split the records particular to the condition, only this record has to send to 0th partition. If the condition does not satisfy, it has to go to the first partition. Then that can be specified in the AB local expression also. So if you're writing an expression like in the table statement, select store from table name where you specify just AB local in the where class, and in the expression you can specify like I want the salary field should be greater than 5000, sorry, less than 5000 in the 0th partition, and in else case all the records which are greater than 5000 will go to the first partition. So that kind of the expressions can be specified in the AB local expression. And we have like remove delimiter, the parameter. So whatever the delimiters we were using it, the same delimiters are present within the data itself in any of the fields. That delimiters can also be removed using this component. And if you don't want to remove and you just want to replace it with the blank characters, as that can also be possible using a parameter called delimiter replacement. So these are the parameters we have it. And if you're connecting to any of the database, these parameters are the mandatory parameter that you will be seeing it in the input table component. But along with this, if you are connecting to the Oracle database, what are the extra parameters that can be seen? One second, be online. Okay, sorry guys. So if we are connecting to the Oracle database, what are the parameters we will be having it? So the first parameter we will be having is Ora interface. So, and we will be having the value called API. So what is the mode you want to unload it? That is what it says. So in the input table component, there is only one mode, which is API, and we will discuss more about this Ora interface and the modes we have it for this parameter in the output table component. And we will be having a parameter called Oracle max KB. So as we see, how many records, maximum rows we want to unload it. Similarly, we are going to unload the data according to the maximum kilobytes. We never do all those things. Whatever the condition satisfies, or only thing maximum number of times we go ahead is we will be selecting either the table, only one table, or we will be giving the select statement with all the where classes whatever we require, and we will be unloading it. Just for the temporary sake, if I wanted to unload for as part of the testing purpose, I want to, a table might have crores of records, I want to unload just for 10 lakhs of records, then you can specify maximum rows. here, and according to the bytes, if you want to unload here, it can be specified. But in real time, the graph whatever we are going to design cannot be having any of the values here. What is the maximum number of rows we have to unload it, because whatever the condition satisfies, whether it's one record or 100 or 1 crore records, every record it has to be processed in the graph. So these parameters are just for testing purpose, maximum rows and maximum Oracle max kilobytes data. And we have like include partitions. So if a table is got partitioned according to the some of the requirement, so let's say the table is partitioned on the date fields. So I don't want to unload the whole data in the partitions. I just wanted to unload few specific partitions. Then we can specify the file with the partition names from which all the partitions it has to be unloaded the data. Yes, that can be possible by include partitions parameter. You specify here the file which have a valid partition names that can be unloaded the data from these partitions. And we have a parameter called parallel mode. So how you wanted to unload the data, all these are like internal purpose only, but even we have a provision to give the values here. So here we will be having the parallel mode as row id and sub partition. So while unloading the data from the table, how you want to unload it, based on the row ID concept or sub partition. So let's say the table is partitioned, and according to the partition, the data will be segregated in the tables. And if I say in such a case, unloading the data as per the row IDs, then let's say I have one table which got partitioned. So while loading the data, one of the record has sent to this partition and the row ID was AAA, and another record AAB. Both the records sent to same partition, and the third record has sent to one of the partition, and fourth record is another partition. So like this, the records are there according to the row IDs in the Oracle. So how you want to unload the data? If I specify according to the row IDs, the data will be from AAA, AAB, C, D, E, F, G, H like this. Because according to the row IDs, the data will be extracted from the table in the parallel mode. But if I say sub-partition wise, the data whichever belongs to one of the partition will be extracted. The partition to partition that gets extracted. So that is what how internally it has to. But the performance will be same in both the cases. I don't see any difference here. Okay, so these are all the parameters we have in the input table. Sorry. Do you have any doubts on this, whatever so far we discussed?
No, Venkat.
Okay, you Ravali?
No, Venkat.
Okay. Okay, and we have many parameters for output table component which we cannot complete by this session. So if you have any doubts, we can discuss, else we can close the session for today.
Venkat, can you show me that output for, ports for this redefine format once?
Redefine format?
output port. Output DML.
Okay.
So here you have defined based on length, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if my fields has based on comma, if you can match three fields, so automatically it will combine those three.
Pardon?
In a row, right?
What is the requirement?
So you have separated the fields based on.
Yeah, it's a
So
fixed
I have
size.
fields. Delimiter is comma for my case.
Okay.
Then within this one field, I need to separate into three different fields.
Yeah. Yeah, using comma you can separate
Then,
it. That can
but
also be.
I can't define the length, right? In that case,
No, you have to specify what is the delimiter. It's a comma.
comma and
Yeah, you have to specify comma as your
yeah,
delimiter.
okay. So I have two fields like one is like Bhagyaraju, comma Veluru, suppose,
Okay.
for example.
Okay.
Now I want to split Bhagya into Bhagya and in one field and Raju in one field.
So you have two commas totally.
No, no, only one comma only. Now I want to become it two commas.
I'm not getting actually. Okay.
See, Bhagya Raju is one field.
Okay.
Bhagya
Space is there or
space
no?
Raju is one field.
Space is
Yeah,
there.
space is there.
Okay.
Yeah, and comma Veluru. Comma is my delimiter.
Okay. This is the thing.
Okay, yeah, fine. Let it be.
Okay. So how you want the output?
So now Bhagya should be one field, comma Raju should be one field, and the last one would be one field.
So for the first field you have to specify space as a delimiter, and the second field you have to specify
Yeah,
comma as a delimiter.
yes, yes.
So it all depends how the data you have it. And the second record, if I have like hmm, so in such a case this will not work. So every time it has to take care, one space should be there in the data. This complete will
Mm-hmm.
go into the data we cannot view because here it takes only two fields. The consistency should be there within the file, whatever you are getting it. So that is the basic part,
Okay.
prerequisite that is in any file. Okay.
Okay. Okay, if consistency is there, then how can we do? For first one, you need to give delimiter as space
Space and comma. So
while redefine format.
what I'm saying is this kind of the data should not be there within the file. Everywhere the consistency should maintain.
Okay, that's
So
fine.
here you can take it text space value, comma value one. Like that you can take it. So in fixed
Okay.
size, I said every first byte, like every first field should have only 7 bytes, right? In this case, if I go with this fixed size instead of space as a delimiter, every field should have the seven
Okay.
bytes because
Hmm.
it has, sorry, 6 bytes.
Okay.
So in this
Okay.
case, if I split with a text space value,
Hmm.
comma and value one, so even there are a chances of two more internally spaces will get available because the fixed size is 6 bytes.
Okay.
But only one thing is
Okay.
the complete all the records within the file should satisfy the according to the DML. Otherwise, the graph will fail.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other doubts, Bhagiraj and Ravali?
I don't have anything,
No.
Venkat.
Hello.
No, Venkat.
Okay. You,
I
Ravali?
said I don't have it.
Okay. Yeah.
Nothing, Venkat.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then we'll close the session for today.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Venkat, one thing.
Okay.
Coming to the broadcast and replicate, which one is more performant? Replicate.
We have to use replicate only. It's not the performance, because the data whatever coming on the flows has to be flowed on the same flow. We should not say
Hmm.
separate the data or make it into single.
Okay.
So the here what will happen is whatever we have the main requirement, that will not satisfy if the data is behaving like that.
Okay. So if you don't want to disturb the parallel processing, then you should go to replicate, right?
No, 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 not like that. The parallel processing is something different, and this replicate is something different. So if you are using any of the partition component, it will run in the parallel mode.
Yeah.
The concept,
That's what you said, right?
you don't compare with replicate with the parallel one, because the replicate will not provide you whatever the partition components are providing. This is here we are you are getting different kind of the parallelism using the replicate. We will discuss that
Okay.
in case of this um, parallelism. But so far you
Okay.
remember that I will again highlight it. So what is this fan out flow and what is this straight flow, and what kind of the parallelism we are getting with the broadcast and what is with replicate, that things we will discuss in two concepts. We have it, one is parallelism and other is types of the flows. There again we
Okay.
will discuss it. Here so far
Yeah.
what you can remember is, with the broadcast it will combine all the records, and with all the partitions it will distribute the same number of records. But the replicate, it will distribute according to the partition records, whatever you have within the partition it will distribute. So far you remember that,
Okay.
and whatever the doubts you have coming to the parallelism and flows, I will clear you. Okay. Any other doubts?
Yeah. No, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, then we will close the
No,
show.
Venkat.
Yeah, thanks Ravali and Bhagiras.
Okay. Thank you.